You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
And hello and welcome to the Braves POSTCAST, part of the all-new Locked On Sports Atlanta. I'm Grant McAuley. He's Jake Mastroianni. We're coming to you after a very frustrating start to the Braves postseason run, not unlike what they were going through about a year ago this time when they opened the National League Division Series with a loss to the Milwaukee Brewers. The Braves battled back in this game one, but came up on the wrong side of a 7-6 score to the Philadelphia Phillies, who grabbed the 1-0 advantage in the NLDS. We got a lot to talk about, obviously, some good, some not so good, and some that's just plain bad. And we'll get to all of it on this edition of the show. As always, we hope you've enjoyed spending the whole season with us here. We hope you're subscribed to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. Enable those alerts so to let you know whenever we drop a new episode. And make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcasts as well. Well, Jake, let's jump right into it. I said there's some good, but I probably should lead with the bad because that's what showed up early for the Braves in this one. And unfortunately, it all began with Max Fried, who was very un-Max Fried-like in game one of the series against the Phillies.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And it looked like it was going to be a typical Max Fried start after the first two batters. I mean, two quick outs. And then next thing you know, 4 straight singles. You know, a couple of balls just out of the reach of Orlando Arcia, a ball that just dropped in front of Acuna. Harper hit a ball really hard to left, but, you know, 4 straight singles in that inning. Next thing you know, you're down 2-0. And as it turns out, as the start went on, it was just not his game. He just did not have his best stuff. The velocity was down for whatever reason. So just not a sharp outing for Max Fried.
No, it wasn't, and that's where it all began with the Braves. Was they really needed him to come out there and at least keep this game manageable, give them a chance to win. He'd done that all season long, but unfortunately, this one, game one on Tuesday, it was the first time that Max Fried failed to go 5 innings in a start all calendar year. So a bad time for that, and the Braves offense was kind of behind the 8 ball in the first 7 or 8 innings of this game, really, and unable to get things going. Let's go to the line score of this one, game one of the NLDS, with the Phillies now leading 1-0. Philadelphia with 7 runs on 12 hits, no errors, 8 men left on base. You'll see a very stark difference between these two clubs when we jump into this. The Braves, who now trail by a game, 6 runs on 9 hits, looks good. You have Max Fried pitching, you score 6 runs in a game, you figure you got a good chance to win. Unfortunately, it didn't work out today. An error, 9 men left on base for the Braves. But here, Jake, is where I saw the big difference in this one. The Phillies, they had that 2-out magic going. They were also 5 for 12 with runners in scoring position. The Braves, their second hit with a runner in scoring position came in the 9th inning, courtesy of Matt Olson and a 3-run homer that made it a much closer game than it felt like all afternoon. That really seemed to be the difference. The Braves had so many opportunities against Ranger Suarez early in this one. He walked 5. The bases were loaded up a couple of different times, and the big hit really eluded the Braves, or at least anybody not named Travis d'Arnaud.
Yeah, it was a frustrating game offensively as well. I mean, we talked about Max Fried, who just clearly didn't have it, but the offense had opportunities early, none bigger than that first inning, obviously, where they had bases loaded, 1 out, huge call there that doesn't go the way of William Contreras, and then he ultimately rolls into a double play, and the Braves get nothing there. You know, you feel like they bounce back and at least pick up 1 there in that first inning. Maybe it changes the momentum of the game a little bit, but to not able to get anything there, they had bases loaded again later in the game with 2 outs, and Travis d'Arnaud, who had, a big game himself, strikes out, unable to get it done there, swinging at some balls outside the zone. So just overall, I thought the offense, on the most part, had more good at-bats than bad at-bats, but the bad at-bats came at really bad times in this game. I mean, like you said, more often than not, 6 runs, 9 hits, 7 walks. That's going to play with this Braves pitching staff. Unfortunately, Max Fried just had the worst game of his season at the worst possible time. And unfortunately, the Braves just couldn't slug their way out of it.
So Fried takes a loss in this game. He drops to 0-1, quite obviously, this postseason. 2-3 in 10 starts lifetime. He was a reliever for the Braves in 2018 and 2019. Didn't get his first start for the Braves in a postseason, that is, until the 2020 pandemic year. Sir Anthony Dominguez, meanwhile, came out of the bullpen. He looked dynamite for the Phillies, who really got what they needed after, Ranger Suarez was done. The Braves were able to chip away some, and of course, the Matt Olson home run made this a 1-run game, which ultimately it was, and the Braves came to life in the 9th. It just, unfortunately, was just not enough, or too little too late, or both of those things. This game lasted nearly 4 hours, 3 hours, 48 minutes, 42,641. I saw a lot of chatter online about this game either not being sold out or Braves fans not showing up. I was in the house, and that was not the case.
Yeah.
This was a packed house. This was a group of Braves fans that, much like the postseason last year, showed up and showed out. They didn't have a lot to cheer about in some of the early happenings in this game, unfortunately, but they were there, and they made their presence known at times as the Braves gave them a little bit of life and, of course, a little bit of a show at the end with a finish. Max Fried in this one, 3 1/3 innings, 8 hits, 6 runs, 4 of them earned, a walk and 2 strikeouts. His error in the third inning led to the 2 unearned runs. So if you ask Max Fried about those 6 runs, he'd say, yep, all 6 of those are on me. Fastball velocity was down, Jake. You mentioned that, over a mile an hour from his seasonal average. And as I was talking about, he didn't have enough with the 8 hits. It seemed like the Phillies were just doing the old thing of hitting them where they ain't. But I hate to point out what the Braves don't have in this series, but one of the things they don't have is Ozzie Albies. And I just kind of wonder what that first inning would have been like with Ozzie at second base, as a couple of balls just got through Orlando Arcia that I don't think get through Ozzie Albies.
Yeah, that's a great point to make. I mean, like I said, there was 2 of those balls that inning were just out of the reach of Arcia, and maybe, maybe Albies makes those plays, but it just wasn't a sharp game overall defensively. I mean, in that inning, you had a ball that just dropped in front of Acuna. I'm not saying he maybe should have made the play, but look at the play that Castellanos made late in that 9th inning, which was a huge play as well. I mean, it's just the little things like that, the throws in that 3rd inning. Fried made a high throw. Travis d'Arnaud made a high throw right after that, almost made another error. Then he had a high throw into second, and then Dansby makes a high throw into third. I mean, it just the little things. Look, the Phillies won this game. They outplayed the Braves. I mean, they did the little things well. They even executed, small ball, had some sack flies, a couple of sack bunts. I mentioned Castellanos made a good defensive play. I mean, they just, other than the walks, they had a lot of them. I thought, Phillies outplayed the Braves by a good margin in this game. And like you said, the final score maybe indicates that it was a little closer than it actually was. But,
Yeah.
Brian Snitker even said it in the post game. Look, they got the big hits and we did it. I mean, it's as simple as that. They came up in the big spots and Braves didn't in this game.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, because there are certain days where you beat yourself, and maybe the Braves did a little bit of that, but there are some days where the other team just outplays you, and the other team got the big hits in this game. There's just no two ways about it. 5 runs were scored with 2 outs in this one, 4 consecutive 2-out hits in the first inning. That kind of set an uncomfortable tone, an uncomfortable precedent. Then the couple of runs that was kind of a self-inflicted wound by Fried making that error in the 3rd inning. And then, as the Phillies did, or as good teams do, and if you're in the playoffs, you're a good team, spoiler alert, they were able to add on and continue to add on. And the 6 runs that were charged with Fried just made it, as you pointed out, Jake, his worst start of the season at the worst time that you could possibly have that. Beyond Fried and beyond what the Phillies were doing, which was just getting a whole bunch of base hits in the early going, the Atlanta offense, you pointed out, did not have the same kind of 2-out magic, and they certainly didn't have the same big hit ability that the Phillies had in this one. First inning, bases loaded. You talked about William Contreras. He had just a brutal missed strike call on a 2-1 pitch that really changed the outcome of that at bat, in my opinion, because I think he would have walked with the bases loaded, and that would have put a run on the board early for the Braves, whereas 1 run at any of these opportunities would have made a big deal. But then Travis d'Arnaud didn't get to hit with the bases loaded in that frame. Well, he led off the 2nd inning with a home run. And I don't know if somewhere in the Braves multiverse he hits a grand slam in the first. We'll never know, but he never got the opportunity. But it was more than just one bad call or one bad play. It was a variety of things that really just added up and helped the Phillies win and really cost the Braves ultimately. 3rd inning, bases loaded, the strikeout of Travis d'Arnaud. You mentioned 4th inning, 2 on, 2 out, strikeout ends that one. 5th inning, 2 on, 2 out, a strikeout ends that one. And the Phillies made a great play on Michael Harris, who nearly gapped one into right center. That would have made a big deal or made a big difference in this game, but it just was not to be. And perhaps no Brave had a tougher day, Jake, than did Dansby Swanson. 0 for 4 heading into the 9th inning with 4 strikeouts. You could see the frustration mounting for him, particularly because we know Dansby has a penchant for coming through with some big hits with runners on base. This was not his day, though he was involved in that 9th inning rally and did score on the Matt Olson homer.
Yeah, him and Riley too, honestly, just did not have it on this day. But Swanson in particular came up in a couple of big spots and just couldn't put the ball in play. I mean, twice he got blown away. His first 2 at-bats blown away with fastballs up, struck out on a couple of pitches down later in the game. So yeah, not a great game for him. Obviously, we know how clutch he's been over the years, but look, just wasn't his game. I was glad to see him get that hit in the 9th inning, and certainly you could see him get pumped up. Hopefully that leads into a bigger game in game 2. The Braves need him. They need Riley, in the middle of that order to get going. Thankfully, Acuna and Olsen had great games in this one, kind of picking up the slack there at the top. But, you really need, though we've talked about it, especially going down the stretch, you really need those 4 guys at the top to have some big moments. Again, I mentioned Acuna and Olsen did. Swanson and Riley really didn't in this one. And that ultimately, played a big difference in the game.
Yeah, it all added in there. But as we've talked about before, I mean, you have to use the old baseball colloquialism, tip your cap to the Phillies, because they got the hits and they did little things and they did the bigger things that they needed to, which included, getting a bunch of guys on and then coming through with a base hit. Nick Castellanos had a great game for them. He had 3 hits. He knocked in 3 runs. He denied a base hit in the 9th inning with a nice diving catch. You mentioned earlier on the Braves side of things, Ronald Acuna Jr. With 3 hits and a walk in this one. So you feel good about Ronald getting on base a bunch of times, but he was not able to cross home plate a bunch of times. And that, unfortunately, was kind of a byproduct of the aforementioned struggles of Dansby Swanson and Austin Riley in this one. Olsen's 3-run homer, that was a big hit. He hit 5 of those against the Phillies this year, home runs, that is. So good to see him swinging a big, an important bat in the important spots late. So maybe that'll give him a little bit of momentum. As you mentioned, the Swanson hit, good to see it. Maybe that'll help him carry over. Well, the Braves, how about, charging back and scoring 3 runs there in the 9th? I know there are no moral victories here. Philadelphia leads this series 1-0, but if the Braves needed to show some signs of life so they feel a little bit better about game 2 and their ability to just kind of be back in this thing or get back in this thing, I think that, those 3 runs in the 9th inning could go a long way toward making them feel a little bit more like themselves than missing all of those opportunities in the first 4 or 5 innings.
You heard a lot of them say it after the game that they were, happy with the way the team fought back, and especially in that 9th inning and made it close. So, yeah, while moral victories don't mean much, especially for fans who just see a loss, perhaps it does mean a little bit something for the confidence of those guys who, honestly came out a little bit sluggish. Did that have anything to do with the long break? Who knows? They're obviously not going to make those excuses or say otherwise, but definitely did come out a little sluggish, had a late rally though, and certainly, had to tax that Phillies bullpen, although Dominguez and Alvarez really breezed through their innings. They didn't have to work very hard, but at least made Eflin kind of work, and you got to see those guys. So if you're looking for a silver lining, it's that the Phillies had to use their top arms, so the Braves got to look at them, and that they did, make a comeback against Eflin in the 9th. So you face that situation again, you feel confident that, you can get a run or 2 off Zach Eflin in that 9th inning.
Yeah, and I think that all matters, and it all adds up to something somewhere. You didn't add up to the runs they needed to win this game, but every little bit helps when you're looking for some kind of momentum in the playoffs, and it can swing on one swing of the bat or on one pitch sometimes. That's just the way that baseball is. Looking at this game 1 loss, which clearly, again, involved a lot of missed opportunities for the Braves in this one. We know that a year ago, Jake, that, they began with a loss against the Milwaukee Brewers, and Charlie Morton was on the mound there, and it was a 2-1 defeat. And the way the Brewers had their pitching staff lined up, you thought, well, it's going to be hard to score some runs in this one. But the next thing you know, the Braves took care of business and got through the NLDS. They're going to have a similar task ahead of them, as we know what the Phillies have lined up for games 2 and assuming game 3. It'll be Zach Wheeler in the second contest, and then we'll see Aaron Nola in game 3. But one thing I think a Brian Snitker-led club has done is they take every game as its own entity, every day as its own opportunity, and they don't get caught looking at, well, what's the scenario for game 3, game 4, game 5? They're going to come out concentrating on game 2, which we'll talk about more in a moment. But I think that's something, Jake, that's just built into the overall personality of this club.
Yeah, we talked about it all season long, and really all last year too, is just the resiliency of this team to shake off bad games and come out the next day and not carry the weight of that game before. So, I mean, history tells us this team, like you said, is going to come out on Wednesday, ready to go, treat it as a brand new day, a brand new game, and get back after it and hopefully play, a much better game than they did on Tuesday. So I'm not worried in the slightest about how game 1 of this series is going to affect them going forward. They've proven time and time again that they can bounce back from, difficult games like this one, close losses, and come through. So that doesn't concern me at all. I'm looking for the Braves to come out in game 2, fired up, ready to go, and focused on evening the series up.
And the Braves have done a great job all season long of winning series, particularly since June the 1st, when they went on that tear that helped them claim the National League East crown from the New York Mets. So with that said, we're going to take a deeper look at game 2 of the series. Before we do, though, I want to remind you that betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games, with reviews and news of every league, MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf. Head on over to betonline.net today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the action that's happening at BetOnline. It's where the game starts. Game 2 at Truist Park with the Phillies up 1-0 over the Braves. It's going to be 21-game winner Kyle Wright on the mound for Atlanta. Zach Wheeler, though, the Phillies ace, gets the ball for the visiting club. One of the things I look at with this, Jake, at least on the right side of things, if you'll pardon the pun, Kyle was 13-2 on his home mound with a sub-3 ERA. I think he's very comfortable at Truist Park, unlike, say, maybe certain Phillies relievers who needs that mound to be remanicured every time he takes it. Kyle Wright has found himself right at home on the center of the diamond at Truist Park, and I think that bodes well for what the Braves need for him to do in Game 2 of the series.
And they need a big start from Kyle Wright. There is no doubt about that. And look, he's won 21 games, this season. Obviously, he goes out there. You expect the Braves to put up a good performance and have a chance to win. But the only thing that really concerns me about this game is that Kyle Wright's similar to Max Fried in the fact that he relies on weak contact and ground balls. And as you see, sometimes, that BABIP goes the other way and those balls in play find holes. And sometimes that happens with Kyle Wright. And we'll see starts where he gives up 7 or 8 hits. You just hope all those hits are singles. And a lot of times they are, but that is the one thing that concerns me. The other thing that concerns me is Zach Wheeler absolutely has owned the Atlanta Braves over his career, and he's a really good pitcher. So it's going to be a tough task, but I mean, the Braves have faced tough tasks before, especially last year in the postseason as well. As you mentioned, that Brewers pitching staff was the best in all of baseball, in my opinion, last year, and the Braves were able to get it done, but they've got to get obviously better starting pitching from Kyle Wright in Game 2. The offense has to keep working those at-bats. Had a lot of deep at-bats early in this game against Suarez, ran that pitch count up and got him out of the game. Hopefully they can do the same against Wheeler, but scratch a couple more runs across early, get some momentum going. So, look, it's not going to be easy, but this Braves team, I think is very good and very capable. So I think it's, an opportunity for them to go out and even up this series and win another ball game.
Yeah, and they need to win a ball game to even things up, and then it's off to Philadelphia for what they hope will be at least a couple of games there. And if it has to come home, it'll come home. But the Braves are going to be all in on game number 2 behind Kyle Wright. I mentioned that he's 13-2 with a 2.86 ERA at his home ballpark on the year. 3 starts against the Phillies. He was 2-1 with a 2.84 ERA. Zach Wheeler, 12-7 on the regular season, 2.82 ERA, big-time strikeout stuff. That goes almost without saying, but I'll say it anyway since that's what we do here. 2-0 in 3 starts against the Braves with a 2.70 ERA, 1 walk, 25 strikeouts. Don't expect a repeat performance of what Ranger Suarez had going on over the first 3 1/3 innings in Game 1. Zach Wheeler is going to be a tough customer. It'll be a late afternoon start. There is a little bit of a threatening weather forecast, so we'll see if we can get this thing started on time. But Game 2, Braves and Phillies, NLDS, 4:35 p.m. Eastern Time at Truist Park. It's Kyle Wright against Zach Wheeler as these two clubs will clash once again on Wednesday. We appreciate you joining us here on the Braves Postcast as always. Unfortunately for Atlanta, this was a tough way to start their postseason run, but they'll be back with another game on Wednesday. We'll be back with another episode of the Locked On Braves Postcast, part of the all-new Locked On Sports Atlanta. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Once again, for Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. Braves fall in Game 1 of the NLDS, 7-6 the final score. We'll be back after Game 2, and until then, so long, everyone.